Well, hey, good morning. It's Dan MacDonald. Thank you so much for tuning in. So this is a topic we were talking about with Gary Kashak. He phoned us last week to talk about a house in a neighborhood in Fontainebleau area. And a lot of neighbors, about 10 neighbors, I believe it was, were calling about one house in particular that was had everyone asking, what you smoking? Some skunky smell coming from there. And this person had 23 cannabis plants in there. Legal, by the way. I know someone said the limit's only 4. Limit's 4 for recreation. If you have a license to grow for medicinal, you can grow more than that. So all these plants, these 23 plants are legal. I just want to make sure that we all know that, because I got a lot of texts last week saying they should call the police. They're not legal. They are legal. That is not the issue here. The issue was, should this be allowed? Because it was bothering a lot of neighbors with the odors. That might have been something that was overlooked when the legalization of cannabis came in. And it'll be status quo in Windsor when it comes to cannabis plant odors, it looks like. The issue was brought up to council following several complaints about the smells last night. The law allows 4 plants, like I said, for household, but those growing for medicinal can obtain a permit from Health Canada to grow more. Councillor Kieran McKenzie says Health Canada has acknowledged the law needs retooling, but until then, the city's hands are tied. He says for now, council is going to take a wait-and-see approach.
At this point, it's not clear the extent to which the municipality would be able to have a role in enforcing bylaws. That's being tested currently in the courts for cases been brought forward concerning the town of Leamington. And we're going to wait to take any specific action or to make any specific investments.
He says there are far too many unanswered questions in all of this.
The federal legislation, I would argue, encroached upon areas of municipal jurisdiction, particularly how in terms of zoning, and sort of opened up some of these questions, I guess, in terms of whether or not municipalities can even have the authority to do enforcement in areas where they normally would have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, a lot of unanswered questions there for sure as far as zoning goes. He feels federal legislation was rushed through, causing problems at the municipal level.
It was done at breakneck speed. You rush through the normal processes of review, revision, and discussion. Certain things may get left unaddressed. It did tread on areas that are specifically what municipalities exist to regulate and to enforce.
So Health Canada is currently undergoing a public consultation on growing regulations, which is set to wrap up this week, May 7th. A report with recommendations is expected shortly after. And joining me on the phone right now to talk about it, because I love talking about anything cannabis with him, frequent commentator on cannabis issues, frequent guest and roundtable member on this show, Jon Liedtke. Morning, John. Thanks for joining us today.
Morning, Dan. Thanks for having me.
So just circling back a little bit before we kind of dive in here, do the neighbors have valid complaints, or is this a small group of people making a lot of noise because of stigma? The house in question, I mean, it does have 23 plants, legal, but that is kind of a lot. I could see it being a little fragrant and bothering some people. Are the complaints valid in your opinion?
Oh, listen, I'm sure that they're valid complaints. You know, it's an issue of being neighborly. It's an issue of living, like, you know, in a society. I get that. I don't necessarily like the odors that emanate around, you know, my personal residence or when I'm out and about in the town. But these are issues that we have to deal with on a, you know, daily, weekly basis, just living in a society. Someone might not like what someone's doing in their next yard next to them, but is it really impacting your quality of life beyond the ability for you to live it, enjoy it? And if we're talking about someone who's growing these plants for a medical purpose, is it really your point to even be discussing this? A doctor wrote a prescription. To me, that's the end of the conversation.
Now, Gary Kashak brought this up, and I thought it was an interesting point to make. Is this at all, do you think, being abused? Maybe someone saying, hey, I got the medical license, now I'm going to grow my own 23 plants, and I'm not accusing this particular house of this at all, but just in general, saying and then selling that on the black market. Was that taken into consideration at all, do you think, with this?
Oh, I think it was definitely taken into consideration. There's a lot of issues at play here as to why someone might need, like from an outside perspective, why would someone need a license for 20 plants, which the government allows every household to just grow 4? Fact of the matter is, if someone is, you know, just juicing raw cannabis plants, you aren't growing it to a point of maturity and you're just juicing stalks. You could be cooking with those stalks. If someone's producing oil out of it, they would have a higher tolerance. So, you know, I don't think it's something that was overlooked by Health Canada. I think it's something that this is a new issue. People didn't necessarily expect it to work the way that it did, but it's played out this way. Again, a doctor works in consultation with a patient, writes a prescription. The patient then gets to grow the cannabis or designate someone to grow it at a different location if need be. If the criminal element does get involved, the great thing is we already have tools that deal with criminal elements in society. It's called police. So I don't see that this is as big an issue as maybe some neighbors want to make it to be, because they just don't like the smell.
Yeah, no, good point for sure. Do you think we're going to see any changes? Like, if you're going to have more than the 4 recreational plants, you're going to need to have some kind of an encasing or enclosure or something. And do you think zoning should be taken into consideration at all?
I don't know. It's tough if there's going to be changes at that level. Of course, we're in a review right now. I think on the 9th of May is when it closes up. There's some concerns in the cannabis community, the industry side of things, that it could become a bit more restricted. But I mean, 4 plants isn't a large number. The medical stream, that's a whole separate conversation. And I would really hate to see the medical stream get, denigrated, restricted, because some people don't like the fact that a doctor prescribed medication to someone else. I don't see the councillor or any other councillors throughout the country really having conversations about the role between a doctor prescribing any medication specifically and how much one should be taking. That is not a role for any elected official to be encroaching in. And I'm sure that that's not what any of our local councillors are gearing towards, but I would urge them to be very hesitant when walking down this road, because quite frankly, it's legal. It's federally legal. It was passed by the House. It was passed by the Senate. Quebec put a ban on home grows in, and that was ruled illegal by our Superior Court. Our medical rights are enshrined. That's a whole other realm that exists. You're talking about someone's property and prohibiting them the ability to produce their own medication on their property. That's tough. On the next scale, I mean, how do you define, what smelly is? We've seen some jurisdictions have gone and bought, like nose smelling devices at $5,000 a pop. But I saw there was one councillor who I believe was up in West Nipissing, and he said that, it's difficult to regulate smells. Who's to say that if we do set, some tolerance level, if there's a numerical value of what's too smelly, you're really, I hate to use slippery slopes, but someone mows their grass. That's a really smelly smell. Someone starts cooking food that I don't like. That's pretty smelly. What about an automotive shop on the street? They put out smells. So the risk at, prohibiting actual business becomes a big risk. Just having complaint-driven bylaw because neighbors don't like each other, that's a really big issue. Enforcement becomes very difficult. How do you prove to a court that something is very smelly again? And then, to me, it's that what's allowed. We let people grow tobacco. We let people homebrew. But now there's conversations about prohibiting or limiting the grow of cannabis. How many brewers in Windsor got their start in a basement or in a garage? Well, that smells really bad too, but I didn't see any of these conversations at this time. Quite frankly, to me, this is like the urban chicken debate, and it's clucking ridiculous.
Quote of the day right there. One more question for you, John. Do you think this is just kind of residual stigma still lingering?
Of course. That's all it is. Some people don't like cannabis, and so, their olfactory senses are a little bit too attuned to something that they're not used to smelling and something that they have prejudices against. And we're going to see these stigmas continue to disappear as more and more of these cases come forward, and municipalities start to realize that, their hands are tied because it is federally legal. It's a plant. And do we really want to start telling people they can't grow tulips in their front yard because their neighbor doesn't like the smell of it? There's no safety concerns here. We saw the councillor say that the risk of them peering over people's fences is too high and there may be a criminal element. The fact of the matter is, in the year 2019, out of the entire country that was authorized to legal weed for its first, grow legal weed for its first year, to possess it, there was only one case, one charge of a, improper grow that was going on. So the safety issue isn't there. If there is a concern of the criminal element, we already have the police that are involved. It's legal. Don't step on people's medical rights. And quite frankly, I would hope that in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a, recession, depression, wherever we're at right now, I think City Council has so many more important things to be dealing with than someone growing a couple cannabis plants that are legal in their backyard.
Yeah, hear. I'm with you, John. John, always a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much.